It was arrogance and stubbornness, I think, that sort of delayed or you know, didn't set us on the right path soon enough, I reckon. Like when I heard no, it was because they didn't know what they were talking about.
They didn't understand the product.
They didn't understand
the market.
What the fuck's wrong with you? You know, like it's all there. It's all on them. Nothing was, you know, on me. And I think that was just a mistake of where I was in my life, and you know, that I thought I knew better. And you know, like it took that belting to sort of, you know, make some strategic decisions around, and I mean, I probably a bit of luck with COVID, but not that much. We're in a good place to take advantage of the COVID upswing, but well and truly by then.
Okay, today in the studio we have Stuart McLeod, all the way from sunny Nevada. Stuart's founded and exited 2 businesses, PayCycle and Karbon, and is now more recently founded and is managing partner at Waverley Studios, a startup studio in the US. Stuart, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Alastair. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Brilliant. And we also have another guest in the studio. We have my, I'm not sure if I should say my partner in crime. That never really works out that well. But we have my co-founder and COO here, Luke Streeter.
Thanks for inviting me along finally, Alastair.
Yeah, well, we're 9 episodes in. I figured
better late than never.
I figured you should make an appearance at some point. Yeah. So, Stuart, you've got a pretty colourful background in entrepreneurship, but it'd be great to get an elevator pitch on what you're doing now at Waverley Studios.
Yeah, so Waverley is a company that creates companies, and I was lucky enough to spend about a year or so off after leaving Karbon in more than capable hands, and thought about what I was best at and what I wanted to do and what I get most joy out of and what I get most purpose out of. And I love the creation stage, the something from nothing aspect of creating anything really, but creating that value, creating those companies is what I love to do. And so a startup studio allows me to do that, and I just have fun, enormous amount of fun doing it. So yeah, that's what Waverley is.
It sounds awesome, especially for someone else that has a creative streak and likes to come up with visions in their mind and at some point hand them over to someone more sensible and operate them like Luke as my COO.
Luke, you've got a job ahead of you.
Yeah.
And I guess on that, the team around you, if your idea creation, like who's around you in Waverley as well?
Yeah, some better the devil you know. I love you, Bruce. I love you, Gus. People that I've worked with before, even from the PayCycle days at Gus, I met at a university in Melbourne, and Bruce, who we've worked, Bruce Phillips from was HPC and now Aprio, and you know, was on the Xero journey very, very early on, and we've got to know each other over the years, and he's definitely the adult in the room, and so the three of us are just I like to hope a powerhouse of creation, and Bruce keeps us on the straight and narrow, and Gus and I go out and do it, and that's the plan.
Well, I want to definitely dig into Waverley in more detail and find out the breadth of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and more around that. But first of all, I want to go back 15 years in time to 2009 and dig into a little bit more around PayCycle.
Yeah.
The build and the sale seemed relatively short, but how did you manage to build a product and sell it to a listed company like Xero in such a short space of time? So, you know, maybe give us a feel of how you managed to build that product and get it to market so quickly.
Yeah, well, it certainly doesn't feel like it was quick. Remember back, so I reckon it's the germination of the idea started in about 2007. I had an IT degree. I was working with Oracle. I had a great job, and then I stuffed it all up and I went and did some things in property in Melbourne. So this is in Melbourne as you said, 2006, 2007. And then so I ended up being a bit broke, and I needed to rest back on my IT degree. So I moved to Canberra, where the rates for hiring were, you know, twice as much or something like that as than the rest of the country. And so I met one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life, who hired me, and he regrets it to this day, I'm sure, John Freeman, and in what was then AusAid, which was responsible for distributing Australian aid overseas. And he was writing applications to do that. And I kind of helped him as a small team of, I don't know, about a dozen or so. But Canberra had this very strange thing where it turned contractors into employees, called a payroll bureau. And and I saw an opportunity on the side, like any good entrepreneur does, and created my own payroll bureau. And so I did it for myself, and then I did it for one more person, then I did it for another person, which ended up being contract one, which we had like 120 contractors, which I ended up selling, but it was earning me like 60 or 70 grand a month towards the end. And I was doing pretty much fuck all for it because I wrote the software, or John did. And so we were using MYOB desktop to run the payroll, and thought there must be a better way. There was no online payroll offering at all in Australia at that time. And so this is, and we saw Xero, we were using a bit of Xero. It was coming from New Zealand. So I think Rod started Xero in 2006, I reckon. So it was still pretty early on for those guys. And, but I love the whole online paradigm. I mean, Salesforce, remember Zendesk and stuff like that? That was only 2006. So this is still... really early. It was so early on. We built the first version of PayCycle in Silverlight, Microsoft Silverlight. So our biggest support issues, and Agus would remember this, were in the plugin for the browser. Like that was the biggest issue we had. And so that was my first scratching of an itch. We built a product that we needed to use in the payroll bureau, which became contract one. And as I said, we sold that. And so that's why we started PayCycle, to scratch our itch.
And how quickly did you get a product up and running and working?
Oh, real quick. We built it in Ollie's bedroom, John's son, who's now like... grown up and left the house and all that. And
so when did you get your first paying customer?
Oh, I should know who that was. I reckon it was early 2009.
Yeah.
It was Steph, we love you. I don't think it was Steph at that. Steph was the first Karbon customer. But I think it was like a 1 or 2 person bookkeeper firm. We realised that Xero was going to be a channel from early on, and so it was an accounting firm, I reckon.
Yeah.
Did you have many free users on it, or was it straight into paid customers? Did you build up much of a free customer base first and then monetize it?
I can't remember. I reckon we would have, because like payments and stuff just wasn't a thing. We would have had to build our own payments solution and everything back then. So I reckon we probably... hand took down credit card numbers over the phone and stuff. So I would guess that we had quite a long trial period before we had paying customers, but I don't remember that bit.
And how much capital did this business need? Because you're doing it in spare bedroom.
Yeah.
Your partner's son's bedroom.
Yep.
You were building it yourselves
Yep.
in your spare time. Like, what sort of capital commitment did this need? And how did you pull that together?
Yeah, well, I mean, it didn't need much, and it happened to the bureau and credit cards basically paid for PayCycle. I mean, our loan
completely
account,
bootstrapped then.
Yeah, completely bootstrapped. I mean, there wasn't, even if we wanted capital, there wasn't any available. I remember doing this really dumb, angel pitch thing that was mind-blowingly stupid. And they had us in this boxing ring, down at Docklands or something in Melbourne. It's and nobody got it. It was for 20 grand. It's fuck. We wasn't going to pay for anything. We ended up with when we sold to Xero, we had 6 staff, and my loan account, I reckon, was 500 grand. And so over 2 years, we spent, 500 tops.
Yeah. And so you did sell to Xero in 2011, I think, for $1.5 million, some of which was cash consideration, some of which was in stock in Xero. What sort of revenue were you at that time?
Fuck all. I reckon it was, I could be wrong. I reckon it's about 20 grand a month. What does that work out? So call it 250. I remember Rod saying was
times revenue.
Yeah, it was like 15 times revenue or something, the price that we sold for. Does that maths make sense?
No, it doesn't, but we'll go with that.
Yeah, so it's probably even less then, right?
Yeah.
It might only be
10
2 grand a month.
Yeah.
It wasn't much.
Yeah.
You know, like we only had 4 or 5 staff, maybe 6 at the end, so we couldn't have been doing very much.
Are you using your own payroll software to pay those staff?
Did we get to that point? I reckon we did. I'd like to think we weren't using MYOB by that stage. I reckon we would have.
So what was the sale to Xero like? So this is early on in Xero's life cycle.
Yep.
They were listed on the New Zealand Stock Exchange at the time.
Yes.
How involved? Because we hear other stories of months and months and months of an army of due diligence from finance to legal to product to whatever else.
Yeah.
What did it look like from your perspective at PayCycle in terms of the due diligence and the complexity and speed of the process?
Yeah, nothing like that. Not one bit.
Is that because it's in Australia?
Yeah.
A bit more chilled.
Rod was over in Aussie, I think, on a roadshow or something. He said, "Why don't we buy you?" And I said, "Okay, for 2 million." He said 1 million. I said 2 million. We split it in the middle, and that was done. Okay. It was more or less like that. Like, I mean, a little bit.
Literally the ideal transaction for any founder, isn't it?
Yeah.
To do it in the pub and.
Yeah, I mean,
agree that
I remember Sarah and Craig coming to Canberra, and we're in the off. We must have had an office by that point because we called it the Cage, because it was in the middle of the city. But in Canberra, it gets so cold and like everybody clears out at night. There's, I guess, homeless and stuff around, but the windows had bars on them, and I remember David Riverford being there, and Sarah Gopel, who's an amazing leader of product at Karbon, and Craig Walker came and did a tech review. So there was about 3 months, I think, from that conversation to close. But one of the hardest things I ever kind of had to do was have the conversation with the staff about selling. Agus went through that, and because what we had to decide at the end of the day was whether PayCycle was going to create more value by itself or with Xero. And I to this day, I think we made the right decision.
And so what was the challenge around the conversation with the team? Did they know you'd built it to sell, or were they was that not necessarily part of the conversation initially, and therefore it was actually they bought into your vision, your dream, and worked for you?
The latter, you'd have to ask Agus, because I still remember the emotional sort of turmoil and stuff we went through. But I've never built anything to sell. Like people have said that to me. It's like I don't build for an exit per se, because I don't know. I think it's a weird thing to do. Like just build great businesses and great product that people love, and what will be. So I would stand by, saying that I didn't build PayCycle to sell. Xero turned out to be, in hindsight, the obvious place for it to go. No worries, but that's all in hindsight, right? Like we didn't know. There was a day where payroll came out of Xero, and Alastair Grigg rang me and said, we're releasing payroll in Xero. And we all thought, fuck, this is the end of it, right? Like Xero's built payroll. And then we sort of had a look at it, and it actually turned out that got Australian users of Xero interested in payroll, and therefore, and it didn't have the facility that we had and the tax calcs and all this stuff, right? And it actually
created the market.
Yeah, it created a market for us, which you can't predict any of that stuff, and I don't try and predict a sale. So the question was, what was the motive about it? I think Agus in particular and some of the team, we were this sort of core little unit that we're having fun and
making a difference together.
And we know every single customer, and we're every time we got a sale, we must have automated it by this point. Every time we got a sale, there was a electronic bell that went off, and all the fun of being 6 people building something as opposed to 100 people building something, which is what Xero was. There was 94 people when we moved over.
Yeah. Reminiscing some of those days. I think in Slack we had a virtual bell whenever we want to climb in the early days, and those kind of 0 to 6 people is scrappy. It's exciting. It's let's figure things as we. I think I've quite often said to Luke, is about you know. The answer is yes, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
And we'll build the parachute on the way down.
Yeah.
I probably pinched that from someone at BBC, I think, or something.
I've recycled it many a time.
Say again?
I've recycled that many a time now as well.
So then you joined Xero,
Yep.
and it started at a 94-person organisation where you joined.
Yep.
And then you, I think, ultimately left because the company got too big, and you didn't feel like you were that agile and nimble as you were at one point, I guess.
My usefulness in a 1,200 person organisation is limited, right? Like, nothing against this. It was and still is a fabulous company. And I'd moved the family to the US, to San Francisco, to sort of try and help the US Xero business along, and probably didn't do a great job, like sort of looking in the wrong areas, and into an amazing, company that's got an enormous market share in the US. So it's hard going, but it just, at that point, it's not for me, and I don't take offense, and I'm sure nobody else does, that we moved on, and yeah, that I had a good 3 years. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from Rod and Ross and all the product and senior leadership team there. They were so generous to me, and I learned about boardroom dynamics and how to pitch in a board, and it was a serious business then. It was I think during my time there they listed on the ASX as well, and and I remember doing road shows with Chris Reid, who I still keep in touch with these days, and we made some great friendships and learned a huge amount. So I'm forever grateful for my time at Xero.
What was the biggest lesson you took from going from a 6-person company to all of a sudden a 1,000, 1,200 person company?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I mean, I do admire the way that you can do that and get away with it's not the right words, but like it really is the duck underwater, being able to accept the criticism that you're going to get when you grow like that. You accept that the culture is going to alter. You accept that things are going to go wrong. They just have to. Like, you can't grow like that and keep things. The gaffer tape's going to break. Yeah, and it just is. And so I admired, how Rod and some of the others went about that and in that way. And I learned that, that you just keep going. Right, like you can't stop once you've sort of on that train. You can't stop, and you just sort of got to accept the criticism and accept that things will break, and accept that things will, not be exactly how you want them, and you just keep going.
So you sold for cash and equity. Good decision.
Yeah, great decision.
Great decision. What sort of increase in share price did Xero go through?
Well, I think
in that period
when we first. We bought we sold PayCycle for cash and equity. I think our shares were at $1 or $1.60 or something. I don't know what Xero is today, but it's a bit more than that.
Yeah, considerably more than that. Yeah, good decision. Let's move on to Karbon.
Yeah.
Okay, so the entrepreneur in you, kind of surrounded by a 1,000 person organization, presumably wants to go out and be that 0 to 1 again.
Yep.
At what point did you have the idea for Karbon? While you were still in Xero, or do you take time out to reflect and balance after that?
No, we didn't take any time out at all. I mean, I was, what was I? Well, 47. It was 10 years ago. It was exactly 10 years ago in April this year. So 37. So I still had, bills to pay and all of that kind of thing. So we were ready to jump in, and we were thinking. So that the germination of the idea was really around, and I don't think this is the right way to go about it, by the way, in hindsight. But it was really around, like, what can we not fuck up, right? Like, what is the idea? What is the business that we're most good at? And when I say we, it's sort of me and those that have been on that journey. John came over, and then eventually Ian came over as well. And so I wouldn't say it came from a place of fear, but like America, to build a business in San Francisco, which I thought was like the the holy grail.
Yeah.
Is like, you know, how can we be successful? How can I go on the funding road trip and raise money easy? Well, you know, we've got all this experience, and like it fucking didn't turn out to be like that at all, like not one bit. And it's not that I regret it's not that I regret making the decision for practice management at all, but how I got there could have been a little bit more thought through, I think. You shouldn't do it out of fear.
And for those that are not familiar with Karbon, what was the Karbon elevator pitch? You mentioned practice management, but is that what it was from day one and where it is today? Just a bit of context for people.
I reckon it is. I reckon more or less, you know, we decided that we were going to solve the shit everywhere problem for accountants. We drew the what is now pretty well known throughout the industry as sort of the Kanban board, and I know that we didn't invent that by any stretch, but you know, we brought that to accountants and we made it easier, and we brought everything together for them. And more apart from a sidebar into tax in the US that wasn't a great idea, it is more or less the product that we imagined in Marin County in Mill Valley with Pax and Sarah and John, and I don't know whether Ian was there, but in the, you know, like 11 years ago.
Can we give some context to how big Karbon is in terms of number of people or revenue proxy or valuation proxy, whatever you're most comfortable with? Just to get context of that versus PayCycle, because PayCycle was a 2-year journey plus the 3-year kind of, you know, post exit, whereas Karbon's been a 10-year journey, or 9 years, 10 years until you kind of largely exited the day-to-day operations.
So I haven't been in Karbon. I handed over to the amazing Mary about 18 months ago. And so when I left, you know, we're sort of 130, 140 people. I know they've grown towards sort of 200-ish now. And we're doing, you know, 10 million plus of revenue or run rate, and it's probably you know, it's increased substantially since then, I'm sure.
Yeah, so if you look at that and apply some sort of similar valuation concepts, SaaS business to PayCycle, that's what, 100 times the size?
Yeah,
thereabouts.
Yeah, thereabouts.
yeah. But people wise, but fewer than 100, obviously. But revenue and valuation probably 100 times. So significant increase in scale from PayCycle to Karbon. And do you think the Xero piece in the middle at that organization, surrounded by Rod and the other leadership team, do you think that helped your kind of experience, confidence, or whatever you want, get you to that? I can build a business 100 times.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt, 100%. Yeah, it's this. Karbon felt like the third business, and it wasn't my. Xero was definitely not my. I'm not saying that Xero was my business, but it felt like the second learning experience.
And so it sounds like an element there where you went from PayCycle founding a business that was a £1.5 million valuation to you know, a much bigger valued business, or a business with complexity. So the next time round, actually, you had a bigger comfort zone on your own and the greater confidence to just be yourself in that situation.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Even to the point, maybe like too much confidence. I think in, you know, perhaps a bit arrogant along the way, where we thought we could raise money easier than it was, and sort of got over our skis a bit. So
we all know what that feels like. Yeah, literally getting over your skis,
figuratively. Yeah, but I mean, Waverley is just the extension of that. Like, I know how to build businesses. I mean, I'm sure I do. We'll find out, won't we? But you know, it feels like it feels like I've done it a few times, and Waverley is just an extension of that. Is like I can do this, and I enjoy it.
So you mentioned, sorry mate, go on.
I was going to say, you mentioned there like a challenge with perhaps going to raise money and not perhaps what you thought. Like, did that change direction of the business? Just change the speed of growth that you're going at? Like, what was the outcome of not getting that?
Changed everything. Raise? I mean, there were 3 or 4 times we were, you know, hours away from not paying payroll, and in the US, like that's basically it.
Chapter 11.
Yeah. And so we second mortgaged our house. We were off salary for 2 years. We pulled another $1 million out of our house to put into Karbon, and then you know, we wrote it out. We just wrote it, and we reduced headcount at one stage. I don't know, I can't remember the exact numbers, but say from 40 to 30, and then, you know, got it slowly back up again. We must have broke even, or, you know, there and thereabouts for a little bit, and then, you know, go out and find Blackbird had put in $1 million at that stage. We'd spent most of that, or if not all of it, and then eventually, sort of around the start of 2019. So there's 5 years in of sort of up and down and up and down, and paying a lot of wages out of our own pockets, and people delaying wages. There's a lot of creative cap table stuff. People sort of going on half wages for long periods of times, and all this stuff. It was really hard for a while.
So these are the things that you don't read about from founders in TechCrunch or on their overnight success stories, right? You don't read about the challenges and the remortgaging your house and not knowing how to pay, you know, maybe behind closed doors, but certainly not openly. So I think it's really great to get into. But I'd quite like to go back to how you actually, because I think you mentioned also at the beginning it might have been harder to get funding. But how did you actually get Karbon off the ground? How did you fund it to begin with? Was it self-funded initially?
Yeah.
Like pre-seed funded by yourselves? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I reckon we put in, maybe John and I put in $500,000 or $1 million. And then Blackbird, actually, the funny thing is to get funded initially was, in hindsight, was quite straightforward. Like, you know, that pre-revenue, that, you know, before you're actually selling anything and you have numbers you got to increase, you know, that, relatively speaking, felt pretty easy. I mean,
Zero to anything is good.
Yeah. Zero. While you're at zero, it's like it's just a deck and a dream and some experience. So that was,
and you had the experience, and but both of starting and working in a large organization
made sense. And,
so on the CV, you had it all, right?
And Nikki and Rick wrote us a check from Blackbird, God love them, wrote us a check from Mill, and it is still in Karbon today. And
what sort of dilution did you take at that point? What sort of stake did they take for $1 million?
I reckon I'd have to have a look. I want to guess 20%.
Yeah, about 20%.
Something like that. One on 4 or something like that.
And so that was easier than when you actually had customers. And was that because you were still finding product market fit, and maybe the traction wasn't as quick as venture wanted to see?
Yeah, the latter, definitely. Like, you know, I still, you know, the SaaSta guy, you know, the triple, double stuff, you know, like, these are just numbers that in our market, selling to, or, you know, distributing, selling to accountants is just not, well, we couldn't achieve them, right? Like we couldn't go from $1 million to $3 million in a year, for instance, which is what that sort of was calling for. We doubled, but that, you know, raising money against guys that are just going bananas in other verticals or whatever at that point in time was just too hard. I mean, we trawled Sandhill Road up and down 60, 70 odd meetings and couldn't find $1. So that was the hardest time.
So what you know, 60, 70 meetings, first meetings, I presume, or were they also set into second meetings or just first meetings?
Yeah.
But at what point do you kind of self-reflect and go, we need to pivot here?
Yeah.
We've spoken with 60 people that are supposed to be in the know, or maybe they're you know, backing other types of businesses. But what do you take from that, or what did you take from that and reflect on and do differently?
Yeah.
Or was it perseverance?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think it was arrogance and stubbornness, I think, that sort of delayed or you know, didn't set us on the right path soon enough, I reckon. Like, when I heard no, it was because they didn't know what they were talking about.
They didn't understand the product.
They didn't understand
the market.
What the fuck's wrong with you? You know, like, it's all there. It's all on them. Nothing was, you know, on me. And I think that was just a mistake of where I was in my life, and you know, that I thought I knew better. And you know, like, it took that belting to sort of, you know, make some strategic decisions around, and I mean, I probably a bit of luck with COVID, but not that much. We're in a good place to take advantage of the COVID upswing, but well and truly by then.
So I think
as on the what was that upswing in Karbon's case then? So that teams were now remote and therefore they needed the practice management software, or
yeah. From a COVID point of view, yeah. I mean, we'd built everything that we had to. It's like we're at that market and did it for us. I shouldn't joke about that, should I? But I mean, the Karbon was perfect for those remote teams that had to go remote overnight. But the point that got us to there, that 2 years in between trying to raise money and getting to COVID were just, like I said before, building a good business. Like, we got rid of the tax stuff and didn't worry about that. We got out of, we're in the process of, getting out of San Francisco, getting cheaper labor, just building a business that made sense.
Interestingly, it's building a better business because of the setbacks, rather than riding a wave which can carry you through in a business that's maybe not optimized from a cost perspective, from a go-to-market strategy perspective. So it's actually, when times get tough, I think I said earlier at lunch, wasn't it? A smooth sea never made a great sailor. But it is that, isn't it? It's the tough times makes it a better
we were doing most of our sales, 50% of our customers and about 70% of our revenue was coming from the US. The currency in Australia was dismal, and so a lot of our development was done in Australia. Like just balancing, managing, costs and just making a good business made us very investable when the time came.
What was the biggest lesson that you took from PayCycle that you implemented in Karbon? But interestingly, you didn't. So we've just talked obviously about funding. You didn't get external or venture backing in PayCycle because it was bootstrapped. So that's obviously been a challenge. But a lesson that you took from PayCycle days that you did apply in Karbon.
Yeah, I'll say the funding thing was always a bit tied to ego, right? Like going out and you read TechCrunch, especially during those heady days of sort of late 2010s, whatever you call them. As people might think it's a bit of a stretch, but practice management that helps accountants run a firm easier, better, less admin, more profitable, more enjoyable, whatever it is, there's good to be had there. And I think that's the lesson I took. You can build great companies with great people, and that is one of the most important things that I feel like that I can bring to the earth.
You took it from 0 to circa 100 people. What you built from that landing that you just described, what was the cutoff point where that culture was hard to maintain 30, 50 people? What, because you lose that, right? You can't have the impact as CEO that you have on the team of 5 that you can on a team of 50, right?
I definitely 50 was all right. 150 I was sort of really struggling. I think, Jordan, I love you. I think the day that I knew it was sort of my time had come was the compensation and audit committee meeting. It's like, I love you guys, but I'm done. I can't.
Sounds way too grown up.
Yeah, the 2 hour meeting was 2 hours too long for you.
Yeah. At least 2 hours long for me. And I admire, I would like to think that I did the intelligent thing and handed it over to people that are more capable to take Karbon to that next stage, and Mary's doing an amazing job.
So it moves us nicely into picking up on the topic of a board and a board composition and the value a board can bring in the good times and the bad times. Did you put the board together, or was it put together by Blackbird, or
no? How
did it come about?
It was so we had a pretty loose board up until Tidemark and Dave invested in the B, and that was a pretty chunky round that sort of set us on a good path for growth.
And how much was that?
40 odd million.
And what did it value at the time, or is that undisclosable?
I don't know. Can we disclose that? I'll ask me.
I'll say you can.
That was sort of 200 plus million.
Yeah. Okay. We'll edit that out if we can't.
Yeah. If Mary says we can't say it, we won't say it. So, and at that point, you know, sort of things change. You know, things get serious. That's money that you can't, you know, just be sort of casual with. And so Dave is one of the most. Dave Wan from Tidemark, who we'd known at TCV through the Xero days. They put 200 odd or something, I think, into Xero after it had listed and stuff. And I'd met Dave through that process, and then we reconnected, you know, later on, and was lucky enough to have Dave in our Series B, and then, so he, you know, he's a very, very experienced operator, one of the brightest guys I've ever met, and so is
he US or
he's US, yeah, on the peninsula in California, and so. He came to the board. Joe was already on the board from Five Elms, also an amazing operator, and they introduced Jack from Clio and myself, and so Dave, Joe, and Jack as an independent and somebody who, you know, much braver than me, sort of founded a company and is doing you know, tens and hundreds of millions of revenue. And so those three, you know, once the company was sort of through that 10 million plus stage, you know, really ran it with rigor, and like it becomes a serious cycle of board meetings, really.
How does that feel as an entrepreneur? Does it help? Did you feel it? Well, obviously it helped the company. Did it help you or hinder you, or do you feel stifled and constrained? And as that kind of entrepreneur that wants to break free and kind of break things?
Yes, all of the above.
Yeah,
it helps. Like you do need to, you need that rigor, right? Like it's people's livelihoods and customers invest decent, you know, real investment money. It all hinders, right? So, yeah, did I love it? No, but did I need it? Yeah. Would I do it again? Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
What's an example of where the board really shone through in a tough time? Really supported you?
Well, yeah, I mean, we were, after COVID, we were sort of hiring too quickly. And I remember being in Germany and Dave rang and said that we've really got to sort of scale this back. And then he supported us, you know, through that time, and I think we had to let go. We must have been 160 odd people, and we had to scale back by 40. And I know, you know, and that was really tough. It's very it's a lot of distraction away from the actual business, but obviously, you know, and it's tougher for the people that don't have their roles after that, of course, but. You know, that they were very supportive, and you know they kept saying, you know, you can only do this once, you can only do this once, you can only do this once, and even though you don't,
otherwise it's even more unsettling for people that are allegedly staying.
Yeah, and even though it feels hard at the time, like they're absolutely right. You know, we scaled back to reduce the cost base to the point where, you know, we're back under control. Burning less and growing sustainably, and the businesses sort of, you know, thrive from there.
Do you have to make those calls personally to the 40 people, or do you have HR?
Well, by that point, even if I wanted to, I couldn't. Yeah, there's too many people involved. It's a whole exercise of all, you know, dozens of people.
And was that trimming in all areas of the business, or was there like a certain, this team's just not needed?
No, it was pretty even all over.
My last question on Karbon, if before we move on to Waverley, which is, you know, the most current and I don't want to say the most exciting, but
I find it
maybe I don't want to do the injustice to Karbon,
no, of course not.
The teams there as well, but I think I mean, it's spawning obviously lots of great, you know, entrepreneurial ideas and running with them very quickly. So it is the most exciting in that sense. But To finish up on Karbon, you mentioned earlier about the cap tables, or actually you mentioned a couple of times about the cap table and maybe cleaning up the cap table. That's my words, not your words. Yep. But what did you mean by that? And kind of in hindsight, what would you have done differently around how fragmented or maybe not fragmented the cap table was?
Well, I made all the mistakes up front, right? Like we had notes on notes, and we had preferences on preferences, and it was a shit show, and of my own creation. And so, you know, when we finally sort of, I mean, my recollection is a bit.
And this is because it was salary in lieu. Was that the main
driver
for it?
It was all of that, and you know, money was sort of, you know, money was easing in, or you know, like we'd put in for payroll, and then we'd sort of, you know, sometimes it'd come back out again because, you know, just the shuffle, right? Like, and you know, none of that is ideal. I don't run any businesses that way anymore. It's horrific, and so it was just a sort of a product of its time. So at the end of the day, the cap table just got a mess, and so we literally had to clean it up. You know, we tried to be as fair as possible, but at the end of the day, like, our money was worth less than investors' money because we had to, you know, honor those term sheets and everything, right? And so, you know, we ended up with options in lieu, and it all worked out fine. But and the cap table is very straightforward these days, and so my lesson in that is just keep your cap tables just straightforward. Like, don't. You know, the ways in which cap tables get, you know, deranged, for want of a better words, is many and plentiful. But yeah, I find it much easier these days just to, you know, you can do one safe, and then that's it. Yeah. Like, you know, don't pile stuff on stuff.
And for those in the UK listening, safe, Luke. The UK equivalent is?
It's a advanced shareholder, ASA, Advanced Shareholders Agreement. So
that sounds right.
The common terminology. A lot of founders say safes, and you're like, that doesn't kind of exist in the UK.
Yeah, they're not that safe if you keep piling them on top of each other.
Let's move on to Waverley Studios. So I want to hear more about what's going on in Waverley. I've obviously heard... you know, some of the ideas and the ambitions when we were on a chairlift out in Morzine and Avoria earlier this year, which is really cool and exciting to hear the breadth and the variety there. And it sounds like these are just ideas that you come up with and run with, which is pretty cool. But yeah, you gave us the elevator pitch on it earlier. You talked about a studio, and earlier today we talked about the difference between a studio and Accelerator. But I think it's worthwhile sharing the difference between studio and Accelerator from your perspective, and therefore what Waverley does that's different to maybe what people are probably more commonly in the UK used to, which is an Accelerator.
Yeah.
Right? And just how different they are.
Yeah, and then there's another one thing in there, another sort of term in the venture studio. So I think startup studios have become a little bit more prominent over the last sort of 10 years or so. There's a couple of hundred around the world now. None of which are identical. Some famous brands that have come out of studios are Front, the email sort of collaboration tool, Hims and Hers, which is a medical
the hair loss, is it?
Hair loss and erectile dysfunction.
I was just about to say I get targeted all the time until you said the erectile dysfunction. I get targeted for the hair. It's all the hair.
And so. But a startup, an accelerator is a group of people that will bring in ideas and other people and help them develop those ideas. A venture studio will be a spin-off or a side shoot of a venture capital firm. Typically, that is endeavouring to sort of come up with ideas based on all their research through screening ideas.
Other people's pitches.
Other people's pitches, yeah, and then funding that and doing that themselves. But a startup studio is a studio where we take our own ideas, and we have our own fund at the moment. We'll do a fund later this year for external money, but we essentially do a pre-seed fund for these, or a pre-seed round for these ideas that we develop. and they go through a factory process that we keep on developing and fine tuning through proof of concept, validation, and then finally go to market and scale.
Yeah, perfect. Let's get into some of the ones that you've come up with, right? and also where they are in their pre-product life cycle.
Yeah. So a lot of studios and we're still sort of playing. We still might go this way. Have a vertical or an approach that they keep their ideas to. That makes sense because you get a lot
all ideas.
Yes, you keep all your ideas. Say in AI, for instance, there's one just making quadrillions of money churning out AI startups, right? Like that would be a sensible thing to do if you're just there to make money, right? So we believe that
change humanity for the better is what you also mean, yeah.
Yeah, yes. Improve people's lives and all that stuff. Yeah. No, we believe that we're good at creating companies that will operate on the verge of the new technology and where the Earth is at, right? So AI applied to green technology is a great example, but there's all kinds of ways that you can interpret that, and we think that there's themes that there are themes or thematics that are developing where we think there'll be some similarities. So we're not strictly vertical. We're not just sort of developing for accountants or something like that. We wouldn't do that. But yeah, we want to try and sort of keep it not so broad in the future. We'll narrow it down a little bit.
So let's pick up I guess you call it product. Product that you're furthest ahead in.
Yeah, so the one that we're furthest ahead in is called Athletic, with an IQ at the end. Which, funny side story, Karbon was Practice IQ at one point, and we had IQ is actually the domain name. The .IQ is Iraq.
Oh right, okay. And you changed it very quickly after.
Well, we actually got somebody went to a DMZ of some sort, to the Iraqi top level domain office. I can only imagine dodging bullets and bombs of some sort to get us a domain. We tried to get practice.iq, but we got one before that just as a test, and then we never heard from him again. I hope he's okay.
All right, bloody hell.
But Athletic is an operations management platform for youth sports. So I happen to be on the board and the president of the local ski team in Incline Village, Nevada. When I came on the board, there's just stuff everywhere, right? Like, I don't know, as an accountant, whether you can relate to the stuff everywhere problem. Yeah. And so,
well, Luke can.
I'm
empathising with him. Yeah.
Oh, we do use Karbon as well.
Yeah.
So
there you go. Hopefully you've got it more under control. And so we had like 9 apps. There was faxes of timesheets. There was a schedule that didn't work for the staff. There's just stuff everywhere. And so
you did say fax,
yes, facsimile. Like they literally were faxing their payroll, and they were writing payroll they were writing checks for payroll, and so these are itinerant kids, coaching for us and stuff, right? And so there'd be kids that never got paid and all this. Anyway, it was a nightmare. So we cleaned it up with Gusto and Deputy. And a few other products, but there's still sort of 7 or 8 products in there. So youth sports even more difficult to sell to than accountants. I understand.
Why is that? Because of security of
volunteer organisations, right? Just no money. But we think that huge industry
and probably no decision making.
A board
ever gets happen.
A board that sort of doesn't is probably not focused on this one thing. So we understand that go to market is a long tail, but we also think that it's a worthwhile cause because promotion or if volunteers can run their organisations more easily, like whether it be football or soccer in America or baseball or basketball or skiing like we do, or whatever it is globally, we think that it's not a market that has been explored greatly by great software makers because it is hard to sell into, it is hard to distribute. And so we think it deserves better, and we think the promotion of kids back out onto the playing field or the pitch or the ski hill or whatever it is a worthwhile cause. And so we've got our first customer coming on doing their registration in 2 weeks.
At your ski school?
At our, it happens to be our ski, at our ski team, yeah. And so we do the ski team does about $1 million of registration. So all that will go through the platform, and hopefully it'll perform well.
So it'll be a fintech as well then?
It is a fintech,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, interesting. So you will also take a slice of the fees there?
Yeah, we think that's the revenue model. So paying per athlete or something, I think, is just a hard sell.
So will it be free then?
I think it'll be free, and we'll take
transaction slice.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if you look at that, would you look at the go-to-market and go, actually, we can get in with, I don't know, the federations at the top level, and so a little bit like how franchising networks.
That is the other model, and there's a successful one in Australia that's done that with sailing. And we've had conversations with USSA, which is US Ski and Snowboard Association. There is, these organisations are not as enjoyable as some others to deal with, but it's not impossible. And so the other thing is grants, right? Like government grants, either local, state, or federal government grants are a really good source of revenue for this stuff. We just have to work hard to find them and utilise them.
And when you look at an idea for the studio, do you try and size it and understand what is the potential for the market here, or do you look at it in a different way, more from a purpose perspective than what can we actually?
Yeah, you can't completely ignore ignore TAM, right? But I'm not. Put it this way: if a VC has got, we look at for big markets on the front of their website, we're probably not their kind of people, right? Because we've seen markets change, market sizes change dramatically in our time in the industry, right? So, youth sports globally is a massive market. What can we reasonably expect to achieve from that? Not that much, but that's okay. Like, I'm not of the school that is like, has to be a massive market in order to raise money, but you can't ignore it because you do need to raise money, I guess, if that makes sense.
So sticking on this application, what have you done in the studio? What have you partnered with an Elastic solution, design, build, whatever it might be? Tell us about how actually you get that product from your head into somebody paying subscriptions through it.
Yeah, so we're the studio is 4 people in total. It's the 3 partners and another, and the studio itself will always be pretty small in payroll, right? So we want to be as nimble and as utilise elastic resources as much as possible.
Back to those PayCycle days.
Yes, It's like I want to travel the world and set up 3 studios. That is my dream job.
And that's why you're in London.
That's why I'm in London. Now. Amanda would love it. My family would love an office here, and so. We utilize for this one. We're trying Top Tower, which is sort of a marketplace for resources. They're all onshore in the US, and we just treat them like a remote workforce. Like we do sprint meetings every week. They're full time. We have a designer as an elastic resource as well, and he produces designs 3 weeks before that they get developed, and we just run it like a product team, like we always have. And that, I think will be the model for some time. We might reuse some of these resources on other projects if we find them great people to utilise. But I don't foresee us, having 24 developers in Incline Village any day soon. That's for sure.
Yeah. And how are you separating out that? At the moment, that almost sounds like you've just come up with an idea. You founded a new business, and you are the CEO of this business, versus who's going to run the business once it takes off.
Yeah, well, once I prove that it's actually a business and we've got revenue, somewhere between, like, depending on the business, $1 and $2 million, we will find what we genuinely call a founder to come in and sort of take that business and have the passion for it that we do and scale it. and we'll give them, or they'll earn equity in order to, to take that business on that journey.
Yeah. It's almost that self-incubation. Once it's too big or too much for your studio as the incubation, you then move on.
We've got more fun things to do, right? Like we've proven that we can do that one, and then, but again, there's just more talented, more energetic, more purposeful people to take those ideas and run with them and produce great results.
Can you give us 30 to 60 seconds on a couple of the other ideas? Just to get a feel for the breadth of some of these, and they're not all in the same arena.
Yeah, so there is a lot of scratching of an itch here. So there's a private margin. So that one's called Athletic. There's private margin, which is loaning to Series B and C stage founders of companies based on the equity in their company. I certainly went through a stage where, the carbon was worth quite a bit, but it's difficult to access capital based on, your private ownership, and especially through the stages where you're getting the most growth. It's just such a pleasure. You get the cash, but a bitter pill when you sort of downsizing your own holding that you've worked so hard to sort of maintain through all the cap table issues and everything, right? So that seems to be a new idea. We've got licenses in 12 states in the US. We can't find anybody else doing it.
I love this one. I think it's so good. And
Sarah's running that and doing a great job. We expect to make our first loan in July.
What would be the magnitude of that?
I reckon like $100,000 or something like that. Just start small. We don't want to do small, but and we don't want, we want to spread out the portfolio. Yeah. So it's just an arbitrage. Yeah. We'll loan money at somewhere between 10 and 12%, and we'll lend it out at somewhere between 15 and 20%, and see if we need to educate the market a bit that product's available. And I'm sure it's a hard market.
Oh, I think knowing a bunch of very paper rich, cash poor founders, I think that will be a huge appetite for that.
There's Bright Earth, which is a carbon accounting-ish platform. We're focused on producing or taking information from a company and producing Scope 1 reports for free. So this is another sort of scratching of an itch a little bit. In carbon, we produce a Scope 1 report. It costs about $6,000 to produce, to work out that we were emitting about $6,000 of carbon a year. Seems a little bit off, but the process to get that that Scope 1 report produced was pretty onerous, right? Like it was spreadsheets and questionnaires but from data that was relatively easily available from SaaS products across the company, right? Like payroll and your GL and all this kind of stuff. So we're using AI to apply to a green tech and produce Scope 1 reports for the small end of for small businesses. So there's a lot of green tech at enterprise, like a huge amount, because they're the ones that are more regulatory bound to produce, to sort of start managing their emissions, and the first stage of managing your emissions is obviously counting them, and it's a lot more detailed process to go through a Scope 3. It's got supply chain and everything in it, and so we're just starting at the bottom. With we know small business pretty well. There's studies in the UK actually that have proven that people want to do better for the climate, but have absolutely no idea about how to go about it in their businesses, and so. We think that talking about TAM before, right? Like who knows the TAM for, carbon-based AI businesses today, let alone tomorrow, right? All we're banking on is a macro factor of the earth is getting hotter and worse. And we want to build companies that, can either slow or improve that process. And our domain knowledge is not extensive, and so we're learning about it as we go. And so we want to build companies in that realm, and this is our first one.
Cool. I want to ask you about being an angel investor, right? So you've been an entrepreneur. Well, you're not been an entrepreneur multiple times. You are an entrepreneur, and you've kind of explored that a number of times. But as an angel investor, what do you look for in a founder when you write a small check to them?
Yeah, I don't love angel investing, to be honest. I sort of did a tiny bit with some local people who with some good businesses, but I've stopped doing it because we've got to raise our own fund, and I'd rather
focus on your investing yourself.
Just the money the devil that you know, and I mean, I hope I know myself. I've done enough therapy to know myself by now. Hopefully,
I think we've given you some therapy.
Yes,
as well,
you have.
over a lot of schnapps.
That's right, exactly.
Maybe for a different episode. That
that might be a more blue episode. But the therapy on the chairlift absolutely counts.
I want to close on metrics.
Yeah.
Obviously, like at Flinder, we're hugely passionate about having, and you mentioned yourself, the data. If you have the data, you can measure it, and then you can take action, take change. So, if you look at Karbon, it's a SaaS business.
Yeah.
Xero as well. You've seen businesses from inception through growing, through exiting, or real large scale. What metrics do you think are important at the start, the middle, and the end of that SaaS journey?
Good question. So see if I can do it in order. The start, you're looking for any signs of life, right? Like website views and drop offs in your in your pay journey, product usage. Like, I mean, if you don't have any money, engagement. What do you ads? Anything. I mean, you sort of. But at any stage, like, you do work out which ones are the important ones, which ones are the North Star. And the one that we worked out at Karbon, and I don't know if they still use it as much as we did, but was net revenue retention.
Yeah.
And like, if you can flick the lights off and grow the business without any new customer, and that business is growing, 10, 15, 20% every year on year. Like that to me was the definition of an amazing business that just kept on growing all by itself, and that obviously the customers were happy and obviously the churn was low. That metric encompassed just pretty much what a great business is.
Net revenue retention.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any nuggets to your younger self that you would share? Having done a number of businesses?
Don't be an arrogant prick.
Drink more schnapps.
Drink more schnapps with Alastair and Luke. There you go. Skiing more zine.
Perfect. Well, we're looking forward to skiing in Jan next year together.
Yeah, can't wait.
Stuart, you've been so super transparent across the life cycle of a number of businesses that you've built, and very successful they've been. So thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It means a lot.
Cheers.